Hello there, and welcome to the Midnight Mind. Today we will talk about facts about clouds to fall asleep to. We drift upward into the softest mystery of all clouds. They seem so simple, those gentle shapes that float above us, pale and weightless against the endless sky. Yet each one holds an ancient story. The cloud passing overhead right now may carry water that once fell as snow on mountain peaks, evaporated from tropical seas, or drifted as mist through forests that vanished millennia ago. Clouds are not merely decorations in the atmosphere. They are sculptors of climate, carriers of life, and painters of the sky's endless canvas. They move with grace, transform without effort, and disappear as quietly as they arrive. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, just breathe. Allow your shoulders to soften, your jaw to relax, and your thoughts to drift upward like vapor rising from a still lake. Let yourself float gently into sleep as we explore the peaceful science of clouds. Let's begin. Every cloud you see is heavier than it appears. A single cumulus cloud, one of those cotton-like puffs that decorates summer afternoons, can weigh as much as 100 elephants. Some contain more than 1 million pounds of water suspended in the air above you. Yet, they float, effortlessly, defying what seems possible. The secret lies not in lightness, but in distribution and motion. Inside each cloud, billions upon billions of tiny water droplets hang suspended. Each droplet is so small that 100 of them placed side by side would barely span the width of a human hair. At this microscopic scale, gravity's pull becomes almost negligible compared to the upward push of rising air currents. Warm air, heated by the sun-touched earth below, expands and becomes less dense than the cooler air surrounding it. This buoyant air rises like an invisible elevator, carrying moisture upward into the sky. As the air climbs higher, it enters regions where atmospheric pressure decreases. The air expands further and cools. When it reaches a certain altitude, called the lifting condensation level, the temperature drops enough that water vapor can no longer remain invisible. The vapor condenses around microscopic particles, dust grains, pollen, even salt crystals carried up from distant oceans. These tiny seeds, called condensation nuclei, provide surfaces where water molecules can gather and transform from gas to liquid. Each droplet that forms is a perfect sphere, held together by surface tension, the same force that allows insects to walk on water. The droplets are so light, so perfectly balanced between gravity and air resistance, that they fall through the atmosphere at speeds slower than a butterfly's flight. Meanwhile, the rising air continues to push upward, supporting them, keeping them aloft. The result is what we call a cloud, a visible gathering of countless droplets, each one floating in its own small miracle of physics. The air within a cloud is never still. It swirls and circulates, creating invisible currents that carry droplets up and down. Some droplets collide and merge, growing slightly larger. Others evaporate back into vapor when they drift into drier air. The cloud breathes, expands, contracts, and reshapes itself moment by moment. What appears from the ground as a solid, unchanging form is actually a dynamic system, a living sculpture made of water and air, held together by temperature and motion. This is why clouds can float for hours or even days before releasing their water as rain. The droplets remain small enough, and the air current strong enough, to maintain the delicate balance. Only when droplets grow large enough, through repeated collisions and merging, do they become too heavy for the air to support. Then, and only then, do they fall as rain, returning to Earth to begin their journey skyward once again. Not all clouds are created equal. Some tower into the sky like mountains, turbulent and dramatic. Others spread across the heavens in gentle layers, soft and serene. The clouds that bring the deepest calm are those that move slowly, change gradually, and paint the sky in muted tones. High above, where the air grows thin and cold, Cirrus clouds form delicate brushstrokes across the blue canvas. They are made not of water droplets but of ice crystals, tiny hexagonal prisms that catch and scatter sunlight. Cirrus means curl in Latin, and these clouds live up to their name, appearing as wispy threads, mare's tails, or feathery strands, combed by winds that blow at hundreds of miles per hour. Yet, from the ground, they seem to drift peacefully, their motion too slow and distant to perceive. They mark the boundary between Earth's weather and the edge of space, floating at altitudes where the air pressure is less than a quarter of what we feel at sea level. Lower in the atmosphere, stratus clouds create the sky's softest blanket. The word stratus comes from the Latin for layer, and these clouds spread horizontally in smooth, even sheets that can cover the entire sky. They form when stable air is gently lifted, or when moist air moves over a cool surface, condensing into a uniform grey veil. Stratus clouds bring diffused light, softening shadows and muting colors. The world beneath them takes on a quiet quality, as if wrapped in cotton. Rain from stratus clouds, when it comes, falls as gentle drizzle, barely more than mist, whispering rather than drumming. Stratocumulus clouds combine the layered nature of stratus with the gentle puffiness of cumulus. They arrange themselves in regular patterns, like rounded tiles on a vast ceiling, or rolls of cotton stretched across the horizon. These clouds often appear during stable weather, when the atmosphere has settled into a calm rhythm. They cast soft, moving shadows on the landscape below, creating a play of light and shade that shifts slowly throughout the day. Watching stratocumulus clouds is like observing a slow-motion ocean, waves of vapor rolling across an invisible sea. In the middle altitudes, altocumulus clouds form small, rounded masses arranged in groups or lines. They resemble a field of cotton balls scattered across the sky, or a flock of sheep grazing on blue pasture. The name combines alto, meaning high, with cumulus, meaning heap. These clouds often appear in beautiful, regular patterns called cloud streets, parallel rows that can stretch for hundreds of miles. They form when atmospheric waves, invisible ripples in the air, create alternating zones of rising and sinking motion. The rising zones build clouds while the sinking zones create clear gaps, producing a mesmerizing rhythm of light and shadow. Perhaps the most ethereal of all are the clouds that form at ground level. Fog is simply a cloud that has descended to touch the earth. It wraps the world in softness, muffling sound and limiting vision to a few gentle meters. Walking through fog feels like moving through a dream, where familiar landscapes become mysterious and distant sounds seem to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Fog forms when air near the ground cools to its dew point, the temperature at which water vapor condenses into visible droplets. It can appear suddenly on cold, clear nights when the earth radiates its heat into space, or gradually when warm, moist air moves over cool water or land. Each of these calm cloud types shares common qualities. They form in stable atmospheric conditions, where air moves smoothly rather than turbulently. They change slowly, allowing the eye to rest on their forms without constant distraction. Their colors are soft, grays and whites and pale blues, never harsh or glaring. They bring a sense of peace to the sky, a reminder that not all weather is dramatic, that much of the atmosphere's work happens quietly, patiently, in layers of vapor so thin they seem almost like thought made visible. Light and clouds dance together in ways that paint the sky with the gentlest palette imaginable. The colors we see in clouds are not inherent to the water itself, but arise from how droplets and ice crystals interact with sunlight, bending and scattering its rays in patterns that shift with angle and time. At sunrise and sunset, when the sun hangs low on the horizon, its light must travel through far more atmosphere to reach our eyes. The journey is long, passing through miles of air filled with molecules that scatter blue light away, leaving only the warmer tones to continue onward. Red, orange, pink, and gold survive this passage, and when they strike the underside of clouds, they transform ordinary vapor into luminous art. The bottoms of clouds glow with coral and rose, while their tops may still catch pure white light from the sun's direct rays. The contrast creates depth and dimension, turning flat sheets of water into three-dimensional sculptures of color. These colors change minute by minute as the sun's angle shifts. What begins as pale yellow deepens to amber, then to salmon pink, then to deep crimson before fading to purple, and finally to the soft blue-gray of twilight. Watching this progression is one of nature's most reliable meditations, a slow transformation that requires no effort to appreciate, only presence and patience. The colors never repeat exactly. Each sunset and sunrise is unique, shaped by the particular distribution of clouds, the amount of moisture in the air, and the presence of dust or particles that alter how light scatters. Sometimes, when conditions align perfectly, the moon creates its own gentle light show. A lunar halo appears when moonlight passes through thin cirrus clouds made of ice crystals. The hexagonal shape of these crystals bends light at specific angles, creating a ring of pale light around the moon, typically with a radius of 22 degrees. The halo glows softly white, sometimes with a faint hint of color at its inner edge, red nearest the moon and blue farther out. This phenomenon has inspired countless myths and weather predictions. Some cultures believed a ring around the moon foretold rain, and they were often correct, since the high, thin clouds that create halos frequently precede approaching storm systems. Even more rare and delicate is cloud iridescence, a phenomenon that occurs in thin clouds near the sun or moon. When droplets in the cloud are all roughly the same size, they diffract light in ways that separate it into pastel colors, greens and pinks and purples that shimmer like oil on water. The effect is subtle and easily missed, requiring the observer to look away from the direct glare of the sun, perhaps shielding their eyes with a hand or building. The colors seem to float within the cloud, ethereal and dreamlike, as if the sky itself were remembering a rainbow. Crepuscular rays offer another form of quiet beauty. These are the beams of sunlight that fan out from behind clouds, creating visible shafts of light and shadow that stretch across the sky. They appear when the sun is low and clouds partially block its light, allowing some rays to pass through gaps while others are absorbed. The beams seem to radiate from a single point, though this is an illusion of perspective. In reality, the rays are parallel, but they appear to converge just as railroad tracks seem to meet at the horizon. The name comes from crepusculum, Latin for twilight, the time when these rays are most visible. They create a cathedral-like quality in the sky, columns of light descending from heaven, inspiring awe and calm in equal measure. On rare summer nights in polar regions, the highest clouds of all become visible. Noctilucent clouds form at the edge of space, more than 50 miles above the Earth's surface, far higher than any weather. They are made of ice crystals so fine they can only be seen when the sun has set below the horizon, but still illuminates these extreme altitudes. They glow with an electric blue light, silver-edged and ghostly, rippling in waves across the twilight sky. These clouds are so high that they catch sunlight long after sunset, shining in the darkness like memories of day. Seeing them requires patience and luck, but those who witness noctilucent clouds describe the experience as otherworldly, a glimpse of something that belongs more to space than to Earth. Clouds move at the pace of dreams, slow enough to seem almost still, yet always in motion. Most clouds drift across the sky at speeds similar to a gentle bicycle ride, perhaps 10 to 20 miles per hour. From the ground, this motion is barely perceptible. You must watch for several minutes to notice that a cloud has changed position, that its edges have shifted, that it has merged with a neighbor or begun to dissolve into invisibility. This slowness is part of their calming effect. In a world of rapid change and constant stimulation, clouds offer a different rhythm. They remind us that not everything moves at the speed of thought or technology. Some processes unfold at their own pace, unhurried and inevitable. Watching clouds teaches patience without instruction, meditation without effort. Some clouds barely seem to move at all. Lenticular clouds, named for their lens-like shape, form in the lee of mountains when stable, moist air flows over a peak and creates standing waves in the atmosphere. These waves remain stationary relative to the ground, even as air flows through them. As air rises into the wave's crest, it cools and condenses into a cloud. As it descends into the trough, it warms and evaporates. The result is a cloud that appears to hover in one place, often for hours, smooth and lens-shaped, sometimes stacked in layers like a pile of plates. The cloud does not move, but the air within it flows constantly, entering on one side and leaving on the other, a river of wind made visible. Wave clouds in general create mesmerizing patterns. When stable layers of air flow over uneven terrain or encounter other atmospheric disturbances, they can develop regular ripples, like water flowing over a shallow streambed. These ripples become visible as parallel bands of clouds separated by clear air, creating a corrugated appearance across the sky. The waves can extend for hundreds of miles, their regular spacing and smooth curves producing a hypnotic visual rhythm. Pilots flying through these regions feel the gentle rise and fall of the wave motion, a slow roller coaster ride through invisible architecture. One of the most peaceful cloud phenomena is virga, rain that falls from clouds but evaporates before reaching the ground. From below, virga appears as dark, trailing streaks beneath a cloud base, like curtains or jellyfish tentacles hanging in the air. The rain begins its descent, each droplet falling through increasingly warm and dry air. As it falls, the droplet shrinks, losing molecules to evaporation, growing smaller and lighter until it disappears entirely, returning to invisible vapor. The visual effect is ethereal, rain that never arrives, a promise unfulfilled yet beautiful in its incompleteness. Virga often occurs in arid regions where the air near the ground is very dry, but it can appear anywhere when conditions are right. Even the formation and dissolution of clouds follows a gentle rhythm. A cumulus cloud begins as a small puff, a single thermal of warm air rising and condensing. If conditions support it, the cloud grows, fed by continued uplift, expanding both vertically and horizontally. It may reach its maximum size within an hour, then slowly begin to evaporate as the thermal weakens or as drier air mixes in from the sides. The edges become ragged, the base rises, and eventually the cloud fades back into invisibility, leaving only blue sky, where moments before there was a tower of white. This entire life cycle, from birth to dissolution, happens in slow motion, a meditation on impermanence and change. The slowest clouds of all are the vast systems that shape our weather over days and weeks. High-pressure systems bring stable, fair weather and often create persistent layers of clouds that change little from day to day. These systems rotate slowly, clockwise in the northern hemisphere and counterclockwise in the southern, driven by the Coriolis effect, the subtle influence of Earth's rotation. From space, these cloud patterns appear as vast spirals, hundreds or thousands of miles across, turning with majestic slowness, completing one rotation over several days. To live beneath such a system is to experience weather at its most stable and predictable, where each day resembles the last, and the sky maintains a consistent character. There is something deeply calming about the scale and precision of clouds, the way they operate according to mathematical principles that govern their every aspect. These numbers are not cold or abstract, but rather reveal the elegant order underlying apparent chaos. At any given moment, approximately 2/3 of Earth's surface lies beneath clouds. This proportion remains remarkably stable over time, a planetary average that shifts only slightly with seasons and climate patterns. It means that right now, as you listen to these words, billions of people across the world share your sky, some seeing clouds, some seeing clear blue, but all connected by the same atmosphere, the same cycle of evaporation and condensation that has operated for billions of years. The droplets that make up clouds are almost impossibly small. A typical cloud droplet measures about 20 micrometers in diameter, roughly 1/50th the width of a human hair. To put this in perspective, if you could line up droplets side by side, you would need 5,000 of them to span a single inch. A single cloud contains not millions or billions, but trillions upon trillions of these droplets, each one a perfect sphere, each one held aloft by the gentlest currents of rising air. For a droplet to grow large enough to fall as rain, it must increase its size by a factor of roughly 100. This happens through collision and coalescence, as droplets bump into each other and merge. In warm clouds, this process can take 30 minutes to an hour. In cold clouds, where ice crystals grow at the expense of liquid droplets, the process may be faster. But always, there is a waiting period, a time when the cloud holds its water, suspended and patient, before releasing it back to Earth. Clouds live brief lives by human standards, though their existence spans far longer than a single breath or heartbeat. A small cumulus cloud might last only 15 to 30 minutes, forming, growing, and dissipating in the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. Larger clouds can persist for hours, and the vast cloud systems associated with weather fronts may maintain their identity for days as they drift across continents. Yet even the longest-lived cloud is temporary, a temporary gathering of water molecules that will soon separate and rejoin the invisible atmosphere. The altitude at which clouds form follows predictable patterns based on temperature and moisture. Low clouds, including stratus and stratocumulus, typically form below 6,500 feet in the portion of atmosphere where we live and breathe. Middle clouds, such as altocumulus and altostratus, occupy the range from 6,500 to 20,000 feet. High clouds, the cirrus family, form above 20,000 feet, where temperatures are always below freezing, and only ice crystals can exist. These divisions are not arbitrary, but reflect fundamental changes in atmospheric properties with height. The amount of water in a cloud, impressive though it may be, represents only a tiny fraction of the atmosphere's total moisture. Most water vapor remains invisible, mixed throughout the air as individual molecules. Only when temperature and pressure conditions are right does this vapor condense into visible droplets. A cubic meter of cloudy air might contain only a few grams of liquid water, spread among billions of droplets. The rest remains as vapor, waiting for its turn to become visible, to join the dance of condensation and evaporation that gives clouds their form. The language of clouds carries its own gentle music, words borrowed from Latin that sound like whispered poetry. These names were given by Luke Howard, an English chemist and meteorologist who in 1803 proposed a classification system that remains in use today. His insight was to recognize that despite infinite variety in their appearance, clouds fall into a limited number of basic types, each with characteristic shapes and behaviors. Cirrus, the high ice crystal clouds, takes its name from the Latin word for a curl of hair or a fringe. The name captures their delicate, wispy appearance, those fine threads drawn across the sky by winds we cannot feel from the ground. To say the word cirrus is to invoke something soft and ephemeral, barely there yet beautiful in its subtlety. Stratus comes from the Latin verb meaning to spread out or to cover. These clouds do exactly that, spreading in horizontal layers that can extend for hundreds of miles, creating an even ceiling of grey or white. The word itself feels stable and calm, a foundation rather than a flourish, solid yet soft. Cumulus means a heap or a pile, from the same root that gives us accumulate and cumulative. These are the clouds of childhood drawings, the puffy cotton balls that tower upward on summer afternoons. The word has a gentle, rolling sound, suggesting something built up gradually, layer upon layer, through patient accumulation. Nimbus means rain cloud or storm cloud, from the Latin word for cloud or vapor. It appears as a modifier in nimbostratus and cumulonimbus, indicating that these clouds are actively producing precipitation. The word carries weight and purpose, a signal that the cloud has reached maturity and is ready to release its water back to Earth. These basic terms combine to create the full taxonomy of clouds. Cirrostratus describes high, sheet-like clouds made of ice. Cirrocumulus refers to high clouds with a puffy or rippled appearance. Altostratus and altocumulus occupy the middle levels, while stratocumulus combines the layered and heaped characteristics. Cumulonimbus, the towering thunderstorm cloud, joins the accumulated heap with the rain-bringing nimbus, describing clouds that can reach from near the ground to the top of the troposphere. True mountains of vapor and ice. There is something soothing about this naming system, the way it brings order to the sky's chaos. When you can name a cloud, you feel a connection to it, a sense that you understand something of its nature and behavior. The names themselves become mantras, words to repeat slowly, feeling their sounds and rhythms. Cirrus, stratus, cumulus, nimbus, each one a small poem, a compressed description of form and function, beauty and purpose. There is scientific reason why watching clouds induces such profound relaxation. The human brain evolved in natural environments where patterns, rhythms, and gentle movements signaled safety and abundance. Clouds embody these qualities perfectly, offering the mind a focus that is engaging without being demanding, complex without being overwhelming. The fractal nature of clouds plays a significant role in their calming effect. Fractals are patterns that repeat at different scales, where each small part resembles the whole. Cloud edges display this property beautifully. Zoom in on a cloud's boundary, and you see the same irregular, branching pattern that appears when viewing the entire cloud. This self-similarity at multiple scales creates visual interest that never becomes boring, because there is always another level of detail to discover, yet the pattern remains fundamentally the same. Research has shown that viewing fractal patterns reduces stress and promotes relaxation. The brain processes these patterns with less effort than it requires for either completely random or completely regular shapes. Clouds hit a sweet spot of complexity, neither too simple nor too chaotic, that allows the visual cortex to engage in a restful way. This is why people can watch clouds for extended periods without tiring, without feeling the need to look away or seek new stimulation. The slow movement of clouds also contributes to their meditative quality. The human eye and brain are exquisitely sensitive to motion, a survival trait that helped our ancestors detect predators and prey. But rapid motion triggers alertness and stress, preparing the body for action. Slow motion, by contrast, signals safety. Nothing that moves as slowly as a cloud poses a threat. The brain can relax its vigilance, can settle into observation without preparation for response. Color plays its role as well. The soft whites and grays of most clouds, the pale blues of the sky, the gentle pastels of sunrise and sunset clouds, all fall within the range of colors that humans find most relaxing. These are the colors of dawn and dusk, times when our ancestors would have been settling down for rest. They lack the intensity and saturation of midday colors, which signal activity and alertness. The muted palette of clouds invites the mind to soften, to release the sharp focus required by brighter, more contrasting scenes. Watching clouds also encourages a particular type of attention that psychologists call soft fascination. Unlike hard fascination, which requires focused concentration and mental effort, soft fascination allows the mind to engage gently, to wander and drift, while still maintaining connection to the stimulus. This state is deeply restorative, allowing mental resources to replenish while remaining peacefully occupied. Nature provides many sources of soft fascination: flowing water, rustling leaves, crackling fires, but few are as accessible and reliable as clouds. The practice of cloud watching can become a form of meditation, a way to anchor attention in the present moment without strain. Unlike some meditation techniques that require discipline and training, cloud watching is effortless. The clouds themselves provide the focus, their constant, subtle changes keeping attention engaged, while their slowness and softness prevent overstimulation. The mind can rest in observation, thoughts arising and passing like the clouds themselves, noticed but not grasped, allowed to drift through awareness without resistance. Every cloud is a chapter in an ancient story, the endless cycle of water between ocean and sky and land and back again. The water vapor that condenses to form today's clouds has traveled this path countless times before, participating in a circulation that predates human history, that predates life itself. The journey begins at the surface, where sunlight strikes water and provides energy for evaporation. Individual water molecules, vibrating with absorbed heat, break free from the liquid's surface tension and enter the air as invisible vapor. This happens constantly, over every ocean, lake, river, and even from soil and vegetation. Plants contribute significantly through transpiration, releasing water vapor through tiny pores in their leaves as part of their respiratory process. A single large tree can transpire hundreds of gallons of water in a day, sending moisture skyward to join the atmospheric flow. Once aloft, water vapor becomes part of the air mass, carried by winds that flow according to patterns shaped by temperature, pressure, and Earth's rotation. Air masses can travel thousands of miles, crossing oceans and continents, before conditions cause the vapor to condense. The vapor that forms a cloud over your head today might have evaporated from a tropical sea weeks ago, or from a mountain lake just yesterday. There is no way to know its origin, no way to trace its path, yet every molecule carries within it the memory of everywhere it has been. When vapor condenses into cloud droplets, it releases the heat energy that was absorbed during evaporation. This latent heat warms the surrounding air, causing it to rise further, often fueling the growth of larger clouds. In this way, clouds participate in the atmosphere's heat engine, moving energy from warm regions to cool ones, from surface to altitude, helping to moderate Earth's temperature and drive weather patterns. The formation of clouds is not merely a visual phenomenon but a crucial mechanism in the planet's energy balance. The water in a cloud may remain suspended for hours or days before falling as precipitation. When it does fall, it may land on vegetation, where some will evaporate directly back into the air. It may soak into soil, where it might be absorbed by plant roots, flow into groundwater, or eventually emerge in a spring. It may fall into a stream that carries it to a river, then to the sea, completing one cycle and beginning another. Or it may fall as snow, remaining frozen for months, years, or even millennia in a glacier before melting and continuing its journey. The average water molecule spends about 9 days in the atmosphere before falling as precipitation. But this is only an average. Some molecules condense and fall within hours, while others might remain aloft for weeks, caught in persistent weather systems, or carried into the upper atmosphere where they can travel great distances. Once on the ground, water's residence time varies even more dramatically. Groundwater might remain underground for thousands of years before emerging. Water in the deep ocean can circulate for centuries, before returning to the surface where it might evaporate again. This cycling connects every part of the planet in an intricate web of exchange. The rain that falls on your garden may have been part of an Antarctic iceberg 100 years ago, or evaporated from the Amazon rainforest last month. The cloud you see today might carry water that will fall as snow in the mountains, melt in spring, flow through rivers where it nourishes fish and forests, and eventually return to the sea where it began. Every cloud is both ancient and new, carrying water that has existed since Earth's formation, yet arranging it in patterns that have never appeared before and will never repeat exactly. When darkness falls, clouds do not disappear but transform, becoming softer presences in the night sky. Moonlight replaces sunlight, painting clouds in shades of silver, grey, and deep blue. The effect is gentler than daylight, more mysterious, inviting the imagination to wander while the eyes rest on subtle forms. A full moon can illuminate clouds almost as clearly as daylight, though without color. The clouds glow pale against the darker sky, their edges softened by the diffused light. Thin clouds create a veil through which the moon shines hazily, its disk enlarged and softened. Thicker clouds may obscure the moon entirely, but even then, they glow from within, backlit by lunar radiance that cannot quite break through but refuses to be completely hidden. When the moon is less than full, or when it has set, clouds become dark shapes against a slightly lighter sky. The eye can still detect them, not by direct vision, but by the way they obscure stars. Where stars shine clearly, the sky is open. Where they vanish, clouds have moved between us and the cosmos. Watching these dark clouds drift across the stellar field creates a sense of depth and motion, a reminder that the sky is not a flat dome but a three-dimensional space through which layers of air and water move at different speeds and directions. Sometimes, city lights or distant lightning illuminate clouds from below, creating a phenomenon called cloud-to-ground reflection. The clouds act as screens, catching and scattering light that would otherwise escape into space. This can create beautiful effects, soft glows of orange or pink or blue that pulse and shift as the light sources change. In areas far from artificial light, the Milky Way itself can cast faint illumination, enough that very high, thin clouds catch and reflect its glow, creating the faintest suggestion of structure in the darkness. This upward lighting creates an entirely different character than the familiar sunlight from above. When city lights shine upward, they paint the cloud bottoms with warm hues, oranges from sodium vapor lamps, bluish whites from LED streetlights, and sometimes the flickering amber of older bulbs. Each city has its own color signature, its own way of painting the night sky. The clouds become canvases for human civilization, reflecting back our presence even when we cannot see the sources of light directly. Lightning creates the most dramatic form of upward illumination. When a bolt strikes within a cloud or between clouds, the entire mass lights up from within, glowing like a lantern for a fraction of a second. This is called sheet lightning when viewed from a distance. Though it is simply regular lightning hidden behind clouds, the effect is magical. A sudden burst of brilliance that reveals cloud structure invisible moments before, then plunges everything back into darkness. Sometimes these flashes occur in rapid succession, creating a strobing effect that makes clouds appear to pulse within a life. The physics behind this reflection is straightforward yet beautiful. Light travels in straight lines until it encounters matter. When photons from ground-based sources strike the tiny water droplets or ice crystals in a cloud, some are absorbed, but many are scattered in new directions. This scattering sends light back toward the ground, and also sideways through the cloud, creating a diffuse glow. The color we see depends on the wavelength of the original light and how far it has traveled through the cloud. Shorter wavelengths like blue scatter more easily, while longer wavelengths like red and orange penetrate further before scattering. In wilderness areas far from any human light, the night sky reveals its own subtle illumination. The combined light of billions of stars in our galaxy creates a faint glow called air glow, though most of what we perceive as the Milky Way's light is starlight that has traveled vast distances to reach us. High-altitude clouds, particularly cirrus made of ice crystals, can catch this starlight and reflect it downward. The effect is extremely subtle, visible only when eyes have fully adapted to darkness, requiring 20 minutes or more without any bright light exposure. But once seen, it reveals that even the darkest night is not truly dark, that light persists in whispers and suggestions, painting the sky in shades of deep blue and gray that the eye can barely distinguish. The transition from day to night brings its own cloud beauty. As the sun sets, the clouds that still catch its light glow brilliantly, while the sky around them darkens. For a brief period, the contrast is stunning, bright clouds against deep blue or purple sky. Then, as the sun sinks further below the horizon, the illumination fades from the clouds' undersides, moving upward until only the very highest clouds still glow. These last to lose the light are often cirrus, ice crystals so high they remain sunlit long after the ground has entered darkness. They shine like gossamer threads of gold against the deepening blue, then fade to gray and finally to invisibility as night completes its arrival. This progression happens with mathematical precision, determined by the angle of the sun below the horizon and the altitude of the clouds. When the sun is 0 to 6 degrees below the horizon, we experience civil twilight, when most clouds still receive some direct or scattered sunlight. From 6 to 12 degrees below, nautical twilight begins, and only the highest clouds catch light. Beyond 12 degrees, during astronomical twilight, even the tallest clouds fall into shadow, though the sky itself still glows faintly from scattered sunlight. The entire process, from sunset to full darkness, can take an hour or more in summer, or less than 30 minutes in winter, depending on latitude and season. The colors during this transition are among nature's most beautiful. They result from the same scattering process that makes the sky blue during the day, but with light traveling through far more atmosphere. As the sun sinks lower, its light must pass through increasing amounts of air, dust, and water vapor. Blue light scatters away early in this journey, leaving progressively warmer colors to reach the clouds. First yellow, then orange, then red, then finally a deep crimson that fades to purple as even the red wavelengths scatter away. Clouds at different altitudes receive different colors simultaneously, creating layered effects. Low clouds might glow orange while middle clouds shine pink, and high clouds remain white or pale yellow. The result is a three-dimensional painting, a sky that reveals its depth through color, showing us the atmosphere's structure in shades and tints that shift moment by moment. Photographers call the period around sunset and sunrise the golden hour, though it might better be called the golden half hour, for the most intense colors last only briefly before fading. At the horizon, where Earth's atmosphere is thickest, a phenomenon called the belt of Venus sometimes appears. This is a pink or reddish band that appears opposite the sunset, caused by backscattered light from the setting sun, illuminating the atmosphere and any clouds present. Below this pink band lies the Earth's shadow, a dark blue-gray segment that rises as the sun sets. Clouds caught in this transition zone display beautiful gradations of color, from warm pink above to cool blue below, a natural gradient that shifts and changes minute by minute. The belt of Venus is named after the planet Venus, which often appears in this part of the sky during twilight, though the phenomenon itself has nothing to do with the planet. It occurs because the setting sun's red and orange light scatters through the atmosphere and illuminates particles and clouds in the eastern sky. Meanwhile, Earth's shadow, the cone of darkness that extends opposite the sun, rises from the horizon as the sun sets. The boundary between sunlit atmosphere and shadowed atmosphere creates the belt, a band of color that can span the entire horizon when conditions are right. This shadow of the Earth is the same shadow that causes lunar eclipses when the moon passes through it. But every evening, we can see its lower edge rising in the east, a gentle reminder of our planet's shape and motion. The shadow appears blue because we are looking through Earth's atmosphere at air that is not receiving direct sunlight, only the scattered blue light that has made it through from other directions. As the sun sinks lower, this shadow rises higher, eventually engulfing the entire sky in darkness. Clouds within the belt of Venus take on extraordinary colors. Their tops, still catching direct sunlight, glow pink or salmon, while their bases, in shadow, appear blue or purple. The contrast can be striking, especially with cumulus clouds that have well-defined tops and bottoms. These clouds become studies in complementary colors, warm and cool tones existing in the same formation, separated by only a few hundred feet of altitude. The effect lasts perhaps 10 to 15 minutes, then fades as the sun sinks too far below the horizon to illuminate even the highest clouds. In polar regions during summer, the sun never fully sets, creating a prolonged twilight where clouds remain visible all night, glowing in the endless dusk. This midnight sun illuminates clouds from unusual angles, creating effects impossible at other latitudes. The light is soft and golden, lacking the harsh intensity of midday, perfect for observing cloud structure and movement without squinting or shading the eyes. Time seems suspended in this endless twilight, and the clouds drift through a world that is neither day nor night but something in between, a liminal space where the usual rules of light and shadow no longer apply. The midnight sun occurs in regions above the Arctic Circle and below the Antarctic Circle during their respective summers. At these latitudes, Earth's tilt causes the sun to trace a circular path around the horizon, without dipping below it. The exact duration depends on how far into the polar regions you travel. At the Arctic Circle itself, the sun remains above the horizon for just 1 day per year, at the summer solstice. Closer to the pole, the period extends, until at the North or South Pole itself, The sun remains continuously visible for 6 months. This continuous daylight creates unique atmospheric conditions. Without the cooling that normally comes with nighttime, temperatures remain relatively stable, and cloud formation follows different patterns than in regions with normal day-night cycles. The low angle of the sun means that clouds receive light from the side rather than from above, creating long shadows and emphasizing texture and structure. Photographers who visit polar regions during this time describe the light as dreamlike, soft and directional, perfect for capturing the subtle details of cloud formations. The psychological effect of endless daylight is profound. Humans evolved with a circadian rhythm tied to the day-night cycle, and disrupting this rhythm can cause disorientation and sleep difficulties. Yet many people report that after an adjustment period, the midnight sun creates a sense of timelessness, where hours blur together and the usual urgency of daylight fades. Activities can continue at any hour, and the distinction between work time and rest time becomes fluid. For cloud watching, it offers the gift of patience, the ability to observe formations for hours without the interruption of darkness, to see how they evolve and change under constant but shifting light. In winter, these same polar regions experience the opposite phenomenon, polar night, when the sun remains below the horizon for extended periods. During this time, clouds are visible only by starlight, moonlight, or the aurora borealis. The aurora, caused by solar particles interacting with Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere, can illuminate clouds with shifting curtains of green, red, and purple light. Clouds seen by aurora light take on otherworldly colors. They're normally white or gray surfaces tinted with the colors of the aurora, creating scenes that seem more like fantasy than reality. And so we return to where we began, floating in the soft space between earth and sky, between waking and sleep. You have journeyed through the science and poetry of clouds, learned their names and natures, discovered the gentle physics that holds them aloft, and the ancient cycles that give them birth. You have seen how light paints them in colors that shift with time and angle, how they reflect the world below and the cosmos above, how they exist in that magical boundary layer where solid earth meets infinite sky. The clouds have been your teachers tonight, showing you through their example how to exist with grace. They do not resist the wind that shapes them. They do not cling to the water they carry. They form and dissolve according to laws they do not question, following patterns that have repeated for billions of years. There is wisdom in this acceptance, in this flowing with, rather than against, the forces that move through our lives. Now, as you prepare to release these thoughts and drift into deeper rest, imagine yourself as light as a cloud droplet. Feel the weight of your body softening into the surface beneath you, supported as completely as water is supported by rising air. Your breath becomes the wind that shapes clouds, slow and steady, in and out. Each cycle a small circulation that mirrors the great cycles of the atmosphere. There is no effort in this breathing, no forcing or controlling. The breath comes and goes of its own accord, just as air currents rise and fall without conscious direction. Notice how your body has its own temperature, its own small climate. Warmth rises from your core toward your skin, just as warm air rises from Earth's surface. Your skin breathes, releasing moisture in tiny amounts, participating in the same evaporation process that feeds clouds. You are not separate from the atmosphere but part of it, exchanging molecules with every breath, contributing your own small portion to the vast circulation that wraps around the planet. Visualize a single cloud, perhaps a small cumulus, white and round against a pale blue sky. Watch it drift slowly from left to right, or right to left. The direction doesn't matter. Notice how its edges are soft, how it changes shape almost imperceptibly, growing slightly here, dissolving slightly there. Let your thoughts become like this cloud, present but not solid, changing but not disappearing, floating through the space of your awareness without effort or intention. This cloud, you are imagining, has its own story. The water within it might have evaporated from an ocean thousands of miles away, carried by winds across continents, lifted by a thermal updraft over sun-warmed land. It has been vapor invisible and free, then condensed into visibility, taking form around a speck of dust or salt. It will remain a cloud for a time, perhaps an hour, perhaps a day, then it will dissolve or fall as rain, continuing its journey. There is no permanence here, only transformation, only the endless cycling between forms. Your thoughts follow this same pattern. They arise from somewhere deep within, surface into consciousness, remain for a time, then fade back into the depths. Some thoughts are like cirrus clouds, high and thin, barely noticeable. Others are like cumulus, substantial and attention-grabbing. Still, others are like stratus, spreading across your entire awareness, coloring everything with a particular mood or feeling. But all of them, without exception, are temporary. All of them will pass, making room for new thoughts, new clouds in the sky of your mind. Take 3 slow breaths now. Breathe in for a count of 4, feeling the air fill your lungs like moisture filling a cloud. Hold for a moment at the top, suspended, weightless, like a droplet floating in still air. Then breathe out for a count of 6, longer than the inhale, releasing everything you no longer need. Let each exhale carry away tension, worry, the need to understand or control. With each breath, you become lighter, softer, more like vapor than solid matter. The first breath releases physical tension. Feel it drain from your shoulders, your jaw, your hands. These muscles have been working all day, holding your body upright, moving you through space. Now they can rest, can soften, can return to their natural state of relaxed readiness. The cloud does not work to float. It simply is, held aloft by forces beyond itself. You too can simply be held by the surface beneath you, supported without effort. The second breath releases mental tension. All the thoughts you have been carrying, the plans and worries and memories, they can rest now. They will still be there tomorrow if you need them, but for this moment, they can dissolve like a cloud dissolving into clear air. There is nothing you need to figure out right now, nothing you need to remember or solve. The night will hold these things for you, keeping them safe while you rest. The third breath releases emotional tension. Whatever feelings you have been carrying, joy or sadness, excitement or anxiety, they too can soften and spread out, becoming less concentrated, less intense. Emotions are like weather systems, moving through the landscape of your inner life. They are real and valid, but they are also temporary. They will change, just as clouds change, just as weather changes. For now, let them be, neither pushing them away nor holding them close, simply acknowledging their presence as you would acknowledge a cloud passing overhead. Imagine now that the cloud you've been watching begins to dissolve. Its edges blur and fade, merging back into the invisible air from which it formed. The process is gentle, natural, requiring no effort. The cloud doesn't struggle or resist. It simply returns to formlessness, becoming once again part of the endless cycle. Let your own thoughts follow this pattern, forming and dissolving, appearing and disappearing, each one released as easily as vapor evaporating into a warm breeze. This dissolution happens at the molecular level. Individual water droplets at the cloud's edge begin to evaporate, their molecules absorbing enough heat energy to break free from the liquid state and return to vapor. As they evaporate, the cloud's boundary retreats inward. More droplets evaporate, and the process continues, accelerating as the cloud shrinks and more of its surface area is exposed to dry air. Within minutes, a cloud that seemed solid and permanent has vanished completely, leaving only clear sky. But the water has not disappeared. It has only changed form, becoming invisible again, mixing with the air, ready to condense once more when conditions are right. This is the essential lesson of clouds, that nothing truly ends, only transforms. The water that was a cloud will be a cloud again, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps next week, perhaps on the other side of the world. It will fall as rain and rise as vapor and form into clouds again and again, forever cycling through the atmosphere. Your thoughts and feelings follow this same pattern of transformation. A thought that seems overwhelming in this moment will fade and be replaced by another. A feeling that seems permanent will shift and change. Nothing in consciousness is static. Everything flows, everything moves, everything transforms. This is not a problem to be solved, but a truth to be accepted, even celebrated. The flowing nature of mind is what allows growth, learning, and healing. If thoughts were permanent, we would be trapped forever in single moments. Instead, we flow like water through clouds, constantly changing, constantly becoming something new. The sky is clear now in your mind's eye, not empty, but full of potential, full of invisible moisture that will someday form new clouds, new patterns, new beauty. You rest in this clear space, this open awareness, neither asleep nor awake, but drifting peacefully between states, like twilight between day and night, like a cloud between water and air. This clear space is your natural state, the background against which all thoughts and feelings arise. It is always there, even when clouds fill the sky, even when storms rage. Just as the blue sky exists, even when hidden by clouds, this clear awareness exists even when obscured by thoughts and emotions. You need not create it or achieve it. You need only recognize it, rest in it, allow yourself to be held by it. In this space, there is no pressure to be anything other than what you are. There is no need to improve or change or become. You are like the sky itself, vast and accommodating, able to hold any weather without being damaged or diminished. Clouds come and go, storms arise and pass, but the sky remains, unchanged and unchanging. Your awareness is like this, spacious enough to contain any experience, stable enough to weather any storm. If thoughts arise, let them. They are simply weather passing through the sky of your mind. You need not follow them or push them away. Notice them as you would notice a distant cloud. Acknowledge their presence and let them drift on. Your attention remains with your breath, with the gentle rise and fall of your chest, with the soft darkness behind your closed eyelids. Some thoughts will be pleasant, like fair-weather cumulus clouds on a summer day. You might notice these and smile, enjoying them briefly before letting them pass. Other thoughts will be less pleasant, like dark storm clouds on the horizon. You might notice these and feel a moment of tension or worry. This, too, is natural. Acknowledge the feeling, recognize it as temporary, and let it pass. The storm cloud will move on, just as all clouds move on, making room for clear sky once again. The key is not to grasp at pleasant thoughts or push away unpleasant ones. Both responses create tension, create the illusion that you are separate from your experience, that you must control what arises in consciousness. But you are not separate from your experience. You are the space in which experience occurs, the sky in which clouds form and dissolve. From this perspective, all thoughts and feelings are equally welcome, equally temporary, equally part of the natural flow of consciousness. The clouds have taught you their secret. They exist without effort, floating on currents they do not create, changing without resistance, releasing what they carry when the time is right. You too can exist this way, held by forces larger than yourself, shaped by rhythms you need not control, free to dissolve into rest and reform in morning light. This is perhaps the deepest wisdom clouds offer, the teaching of effortless existence. Clouds do not try to be clouds. They do not worry about their shape or size or duration. They do not compare themselves to other clouds or wish they were different. They simply are, moment by moment, responding to conditions, following natural laws, existing without self-consciousness or doubt. Imagine living this way, even for a moment. Imagine releasing the constant effort of trying to be someone, of maintaining an image, of controlling how others see you. Imagine simply being, responding naturally to whatever arises, trusting that you are exactly as you should be in this moment. This is not passivity or resignation. It is a profound acceptance of reality as it is, a recognition that you are part of a larger system, held and shaped by forces beyond your control, and that this is not a problem, but a gift. Think about how much energy you spend each day trying to appear a certain way. You choose words carefully, adjust your posture, manage your facial expressions, all to create an impression. You worry about what others think, whether they approve, whether they understand you correctly. This effort is exhausting, like swimming against a current that never stops flowing. It creates tension in your shoulders, tightness in your chest, a constant hum of anxiety that colors every interaction. Now imagine letting all of that go, just for this moment. Imagine that no one is watching, no one is judging, no one expects anything from you at all. You are alone with yourself, free from the need to perform or prove or protect. How would you breathe? How would your body settle? What would your face do if it didn't need to communicate anything to anyone? Most likely, you would soften. Your shoulders would drop away from your ears. Your jaw would unclench. Your breathing would deepen and slow, filling your belly rather than staying shallow in your chest. This is your natural state, the way your body wants to be when it's not working to maintain an appearance. This is how clouds exist in their natural form, shaped only by the air around them, not by any effort of their own. Children understand this instinctively. Watch a young child at play, completely absorbed in building with blocks or drawing with crayons. They are not thinking about how they look or what others think. They are simply being fully present in the activity, responding naturally to whatever interests them. Their faces show every emotion without filter. Their bodies move with unself-conscious grace. They have not yet learned to divide themselves into the person they are and the person they present to the world. As we grow older, we learn to create this division. We learn that some parts of ourselves are acceptable and others are not. We learn to hide certain feelings, to suppress certain reactions, to present a version of ourselves that we hope will be loved and accepted. This learning is necessary in some ways, helping us navigate social situations and maintain relationships. But it also creates distance from our authentic selves, from the natural, unforced way of being that we knew as children. What would it mean to return to that naturalness? Not as children, but as adults who have learned and grown. It would mean keeping the wisdom and understanding we've gained while releasing the constant self-monitoring and self-judgment. It would mean responding to life from a place of authenticity rather than performance, trusting our natural reactions rather than constantly second-guessing them. This doesn't mean saying or doing whatever comes to mind without consideration. Clouds respond to the air around them, shaping themselves according to atmospheric conditions. They don't fight against the wind, but they also don't ignore it. In the same way, authentic living means being aware of context and circumstances while remaining true to your essential nature. It means responding rather than reacting, choosing actions that align with your values rather than simply following impulses. The difference is subtle but important. Reaction is automatic, unconscious, driven by habit and conditioning. Response is conscious, aware, arising from a deeper place of understanding. When you release the effort of maintaining an image, you create space for genuine response. You can perceive situations more clearly because you're not filtering everything through the lens of how it affects your self-image. You can act more freely because you're not constantly calculating how your actions will be interpreted. To understand this difference more deeply, imagine someone says something that hurts your feelings. A reaction might be immediate anger, a sharp retort, or withdrawal into silence. These responses happen so quickly you barely notice them forming. They arise from old patterns perhaps learned in childhood when similar situations occurred. The anger might come from a parent's temper that you absorbed. The sharp words might echo things said to you long ago. The withdrawal might repeat a strategy that once protected you from further harm. These reactions are not chosen in the moment. They emerge automatically, like reflexes, bypassing conscious thought. Your body tenses before you realize you're upset. Words form in your mouth before you decide to speak them. You find yourself acting in ways you later regret, wondering why you responded that way, wishing you had done differently. This is the nature of reaction. It happens to you rather than through you, controlled by patterns laid down in the past, rather than chosen in the present. Response, by contrast, involves a pause, however brief. In that pause, awareness enters. You notice the hurt feeling arising. You feel the impulse toward anger or withdrawal. But instead of immediately acting on these impulses, you hold them in consciousness for a moment. You ask yourself what is actually happening, what you actually need, what action would be most aligned with your values and intentions. From this place of awareness, you choose how to respond. The response might look similar to the reaction from the outside. You might still express that you're hurt, might still need space to process your feelings. But the quality is different. The response comes from choice rather than compulsion, from awareness rather than automaticity. It carries less charge, less unconscious energy. It is more likely to lead to understanding and resolution, rather than escalation and disconnection. This capacity for response rather than reaction is one of the fundamental differences between humans and simpler organisms. A single-celled creature reacts to its environment with simple, automatic behaviors. It moves toward food, away from toxins, without any awareness or choice. As organisms become more complex, they develop greater capacity for response, for taking in information, processing it, and choosing action based on more sophisticated understanding. Humans have the greatest capacity for this kind of conscious response, yet we often don't use it. We fall into reactive patterns, operating on autopilot, letting old conditioning determine our behavior. This happens partly because reaction is easier and faster. It requires no effort, no attention, no energy. Response requires all of these things. It requires that we pause, that we bring awareness to the situation, that we consciously choose rather than automatically react. When you release the effort of maintaining an image, you create space for genuine response. This happens because so much of your mental energy usually goes towards self-monitoring and self-management. Part of your attention is always watching yourself, evaluating how you're coming across, adjusting your behavior to create the desired impression. This constant self-surveillance takes up bandwidth that could otherwise be used for awareness and response. Imagine your attention as a spotlight. When you're focused on maintaining an image, much of that spotlight shines inward, illuminating yourself, checking constantly to make sure you're presenting correctly. Only a portion of the light remains to shine outward on the situation itself. You're seeing the world through a narrow beam, missing much of what's actually happening because you're so focused on yourself. When you release this self-focus, the full spotlight becomes available. You can see situations more completely, noticing details you would have missed, perceiving nuances that were previously invisible. You can take in more information, understand contexts more fully, respond to what's actually present rather than to your assumptions or fears about what's present. You can perceive situations more clearly because you're not filtering everything through the lens of how it affects your self-image. This filtering is constant and usually unconscious. Every interaction, every piece of feedback, every outcome gets processed through the question of what it means about you. Does this make you look good or bad? Does it confirm or threaten your sense of yourself? Does it support or undermine the image you're trying to project? This filtering distorts perception. You see what you expect to see, what fits your existing beliefs about yourself and others. You miss information that doesn't fit your narrative. You interpret ambiguous situations in ways that confirm your fears or support your defenses. The result is that you're often responding not to reality but to your filtered, distorted version of reality. When you stop filtering through self-image, reality becomes clearer. You can see people as they actually are, rather than as threats or supports to your ego. You can hear feedback as information rather than as judgment. You can experience failure as a learning opportunity rather than as a reflection of your worth. The world becomes less about you and more about itself. And paradoxically, this allows you to engage with it more effectively. You can act more freely because you're not constantly calculating how your actions will be interpreted. This calculation is exhausting and limiting. Before speaking, you run through possible interpretations. Will this make me seem smart or stupid, confident or arrogant, friendly or desperate? The calculation slows you down, makes you second-guess yourself, often leads you to say nothing at all rather than risk saying the wrong thing. This constant calculation also makes your behavior stiff and artificial. People can sense when someone is performing rather than being genuine. They might not be able to articulate what feels off, but they feel it. The connection remains superficial because you're not really present. You're too busy managing your presentation to actually engage authentically. When you stop calculating, your behavior becomes more fluid and natural. Words come more easily because you're not screening them through multiple filters before speaking. Actions flow more smoothly because you're not constantly second-guessing yourself. You become more spontaneous, more alive, more genuinely yourself. And ironically, this authenticity usually creates better impressions than all your careful image management ever did. This way of being requires trust. Trust that you are fundamentally okay, that your natural responses are generally appropriate, that you don't need to constantly manage and control yourself to be acceptable. This trust is difficult for many people because we've been taught to be suspicious of our own nature, to believe that without constant vigilance we would behave badly or foolishly. The need for trust cannot be overstated. Without it, you cannot relax into authentic being. You remain perpetually on guard, monitoring and managing, never quite at ease. This vigilance is tiring, but more than that, it prevents genuine connection and spontaneous joy. You cannot fully experience life when you're always standing apart from it, watching yourself live rather than actually living. Trust that you are fundamentally okay means believing at a deep level that your basic nature is acceptable, even good. This doesn't mean you never make mistakes or never need to grow. It means that your essential self, the core of who you are beneath all conditioning and defense, is worthy of existence and love. You don't need to earn your right to be here through perfect behavior or constant achievement. You belong simply because you are. This trust is difficult to develop because many of us received messages throughout childhood that contradicted it. Perhaps you were criticized frequently, taught that your natural impulses were wrong or bad. Perhaps love and approval were conditional, given only when you behaved in certain ways. Perhaps you were compared unfavorably to others, taught to see yourself as deficient or lacking. These messages, repeated over years, created deep doubt about your fundamental okayness. Even without overt criticism, the simple process of socialization teaches us to distrust our nature. We learn that some feelings are acceptable and others are not. We learn that certain behaviors are rewarded and others are punished. We learn to divide ourselves into acceptable and unacceptable parts, showing the former and hiding the latter. This division creates the belief that our true nature is somehow problematic, that we must constantly work to present an edited, improved version of ourselves. Trust that your natural responses are generally appropriate means believing that your instincts and impulses, while not infallible, are generally trustworthy guides. This doesn't mean every impulse should be acted on without consideration. It means that your gut reactions, your emotional responses, your spontaneous inclinations usually contain valuable information and generally point in useful directions. Many people have learned to distrust these natural responses completely. They've been taught that their feelings are wrong, their instincts are misleading, their spontaneous reactions are inappropriate. They've learned to override their internal guidance system and rely instead on external rules and others' expectations. This creates a disconnect from self, a sense of not knowing what you really want or feel because you've spent so long ignoring or suppressing those signals. Rebuilding trust in your natural responses is a gradual process. It starts with paying attention to them rather than immediately dismissing or overriding them. When you feel uncomfortable in a situation, instead of telling yourself you shouldn't feel that way, you ask what the discomfort might be telling you. When you feel drawn toward something, instead of questioning whether you should want it, you explore what the attraction means. Over time, you learn that your internal guidance system, while imperfect, is generally reliable and often wiser than your conscious reasoning. Trust that you don't need to constantly manage and control yourself to be acceptable means believing that you can relax your vigilance without disaster resulting. This is perhaps the hardest trust to develop because it requires testing, actually loosening control, and seeing what happens. Many people are terrified of this, convinced that without constant management, they would say terrible things, make horrible mistakes, reveal themselves as fundamentally flawed. But what usually happens when people begin to relax this control is surprising. They don't become monsters. They don't offend everyone around them. Instead, they become more likable, more genuine, more connected. Their relationships deepen because people sense the authenticity and respond to it. Their self-expression becomes more creative and spontaneous. They experience more joy and less anxiety. The disaster they feared doesn't materialize. This trust is difficult for many people because we've been taught to be suspicious of our own nature, to believe that without constant vigilance we would behave badly or foolishly. This teaching begins early and comes from many sources. Parents who are anxious or controlling may convey that the child cannot be trusted to make good decisions. Teachers who emphasize rules and compliance may suggest that without external control, chaos would result. Religious traditions that emphasize human sinfulness may teach that our natural inclinations lead toward evil. Even well-meaning guidance can create this suspicion. When adults tell children to think before you act or control yourself, they're often trying to help the child develop self-regulation. But if delivered with a tone of distrust, these messages can communicate that the child's natural impulses are dangerous and must be constantly monitored and suppressed. The child internalizes this distrust, developing an adversarial relationship with their own nature. Cultural messages reinforce this suspicion. Stories and movies often portray the conflict between civilization and savagery, reason and passion, control and chaos. The message is that our civilized, controlled self is good, and our natural, spontaneous self is dangerous. We must constantly work to suppress the latter and strengthen the former. This creates the exhausting project of self-management, the constant effort to be other than we naturally are. The belief that without constant vigilance we would behave badly or foolishly is rarely tested. Most people maintain their vigilance throughout their lives, never discovering whether it's actually necessary. They assume that the vigilance is what keeps them acceptable, never considering that they might be acceptable without it. The few times they do relax control, perhaps when drinking alcohol or in moments of extreme emotion, they may indeed behave in ways they later regret, which seems to confirm that constant control is necessary. But these moments of loss of control are different from the conscious relaxation of unnecessary vigilance. When control is lost rather than released, behavior can indeed become problematic. But when vigilance is consciously relaxed while awareness is maintained, behavior generally remains appropriate and often becomes more skillful. The difference is between unconscious reaction and conscious response, between being controlled by impulses and being guided by them. But observe clouds again. They never behave badly. They never make mistakes. They simply respond to conditions, forming and dissolving, moving and changing, always perfectly aligned with the natural laws that govern them. They don't worry about being the wrong shape or appearing at the wrong time. They exist with complete confidence in their own nature, not because they think about it, but because they have no capacity for self-doubt. Clouds offer a perfect example of natural being, of existence without self-consciousness or self-judgment. A cloud forms when conditions are right, when temperature and humidity and atmospheric pressure align to cause water vapor to condense. It doesn't question whether it should form, doesn't worry about whether it's forming correctly, doesn't compare itself to other clouds. It simply forms, naturally and inevitably, following physical laws that govern its behavior. The cloud never behaves badly because there is no standard of good and bad behavior for clouds. A cloud that brings rain is not better than one that doesn't. A cloud that lasts for hours is not superior to one that dissolves in minutes. A cloud that forms a perfect shape is not more valuable than one with irregular edges. Each cloud simply is what it is, shaped by the conditions that created it, existing without judgment or evaluation. This doesn't mean clouds are all the same or that their differences don't matter. Some clouds bring needed rain to drought-stricken land. Others block sunlight that crops need to grow. Some create beautiful sunsets, while others obscure the view. The effects of clouds vary widely and matter greatly to those affected. But the clouds themselves don't judge these effects. They don't try to be helpful or harmful. They simply exist according to their nature. Clouds never make mistakes because a mistake implies deviation from an intended outcome, and clouds have no intentions. They don't try to be anything other than what they are. They don't have goals they might fail to achieve, or standards they might fail to meet. They simply respond to conditions moment by moment, their form and behavior emerging naturally from the interplay of physical forces. When a cloud dissolves, it hasn't failed. It has simply reached the end of its visible phase, the point where conditions no longer support its condensed form. The water doesn't disappear, but returns to vapor, ready to condense again when circumstances allow. There is no loss in this dissolution, only transformation, only the continuation of an endless cycle. The cloud doesn't mourn its passing or cling to its form. It releases naturally, effortlessly, when the time comes. They simply respond to conditions, forming and dissolving, moving and changing, always perfectly aligned with the natural laws that govern them. This alignment is not an achievement, but an inevitability. Clouds cannot help but follow natural laws. They have no choice, no capacity to rebel or resist. Gravity, temperature, pressure, humidity, these forces shape cloud behavior completely, and the clouds respond without question or hesitation. This might seem to make clouds mere passive objects, entirely determined by external forces with no agency or autonomy. In a sense, this is true. Clouds don't make choices. They don't decide where to go or what shape to take. They are shaped entirely by conditions. Yet there is a kind of perfection in this complete responsiveness, a grace in the way clouds flow with rather than against the forces that move them. Humans are different from clouds in having consciousness, choice, and the capacity for self-reflection. We are not entirely determined by external conditions. We can imagine alternatives, can choose to act against our immediate impulses, can shape ourselves through conscious effort. This capacity is what makes us human, what allows for culture, morality, growth, and change. It is precious and should not be dismissed. Yet this capacity also creates the possibility of being out of alignment with our nature, of trying to be something we're not, of forcing ourselves into shapes that don't fit. We can imagine we should be different, and then exhaust ourselves trying to achieve that imagined ideal. We can judge our natural responses as wrong and suppress them. We can create elaborate defenses against our own truth. This is suffering that clouds never experience. The invitation is not to become like clouds, to abandon consciousness and choice. It is to bring to human life some of the ease and naturalness that clouds embody, to respond to conditions more fluidly, to release what no longer serves more readily, to exist with less self-judgment and more self-acceptance, to maintain awareness and choice while reducing the constant effort to be other than we are. They don't worry about being the wrong shape or appearing at the wrong time. A cloud that forms at midnight is not late. A cloud that appears wispy when others are dense is not defective. A cloud that drifts east when others drift west is not rebellious. Each cloud exists in its particular form, at its particular time, in its particular place, and there is no standard against which it falls short. Human worry often centers on exactly these concerns. We worry we're not enough, not right, not what we should be. We compare ourselves to others and find ourselves lacking. We judge our timing, thinking we should be further along in life, should have achieved more by now, should have figured things out sooner. We criticize our natural tendencies, wishing we were more outgoing or more focused or more disciplined or more relaxed. This worry is exhausting and ultimately pointless. Like clouds, we are shaped by forces largely beyond our control. Our genetics, our upbringing, our circumstances, all of these have made us who we are. We can grow and change, but we cannot become fundamentally different people. We cannot be someone else, can only be more fully ourselves. The worry about being wrong or inadequate is based on comparison to an imagined ideal that may not even be appropriate for us. Clouds exist with complete confidence in their own nature, not because they think about it, but because they have no capacity for self-doubt. This is the final and perhaps most important observation. Clouds don't need to develop confidence or overcome insecurity. They simply exist without the capacity to question their existence. They cannot doubt themselves because they have no self-awareness, no ability to step back and evaluate whether they are acceptable or adequate. Humans do have this capacity for self-awareness and self-evaluation. It is part of what makes us human, and it enables learning and growth. We can observe ourselves, notice patterns, recognize when our behavior doesn't align with our values, and choose to change. This is valuable and important. But this same capacity creates the possibility of excessive self-doubt, of constant self-criticism, of never feeling quite good enough. The confidence clouds display is not something we can simply copy. We cannot eliminate self-awareness or turn off self-evaluation. But we can learn to hold these capacities more lightly, to use them as tools for growth rather than weapons for self-attack. We can observe ourselves with curiosity rather than judgment. We can notice our patterns without condemning them. We can recognize areas for growth without concluding we are fundamentally flawed. We can cultivate a kind of confidence that is compatible with self-awareness, a trust in our basic nature that allows for imperfection and growth. This confidence doesn't come from thinking about how great we are, or convincing ourselves we're better than others. It comes from accepting ourselves as we are, recognizing that like clouds, we are natural phenomena, shaped by forces beyond our control, doing our best to respond to conditions worthy of existence, simply because we exist. This acceptance is not resignation or complacency. It is the foundation for genuine growth. When you accept yourself as you are, you can see clearly what might benefit from change. When you're constantly fighting against yourself, most of your energy goes into that internal struggle. When you accept yourself, that energy becomes available for actual development and transformation. Clouds teach this lesson simply by being what they are. They don't try to be clouds. They don't work at floating or practice their shapes. They simply exist, naturally and effortlessly, in complete alignment with their nature. They invite you to consider what it might be like to live this way, to exist with less effort and more ease, to trust your nature more and judge it less, to respond to life with the same fluid grace that clouds demonstrate every time they drift across the sky. You have that capacity for self-doubt, and it cannot be eliminated entirely, but it can be quieted, softened, held more lightly. You can notice the voice of self-criticism without believing everything it says. You can observe your tendency to judge yourself without adding more judgment on top of it. You can practice treating yourself with the same gentle acceptance you might offer to a cloud drifting past, simply acknowledging what is, without needing to change or fix or improve it. This acceptance is not the same as complacency. You can accept yourself as you are in this moment while still growing and changing. In fact, genuine acceptance is often the foundation for real change. When you're constantly fighting against yourself, most of your energy goes into that internal struggle. When you accept yourself, that energy becomes available for actual growth and transformation. Think of a plant growing. It doesn't reject its current size in order to become larger. It accepts where it is and naturally expands from that point. A seed doesn't criticize itself for not yet being a tree. It simply responds to the conditions around it, water and soil and sunlight, and grows according to its nature. You can approach your own development in the same way, accepting your current state while naturally expanding and evolving. This is not passivity or resignation. It is a profound acceptance of reality as it is, a recognition that you are part of a larger system, held and shaped by forces beyond your control, and that this is not a problem but a gift. Consider what passivity actually means. It means giving up, surrendering to circumstances without any engagement or response. It means becoming a victim, helpless and powerless, waiting for external forces to determine your fate. This is not what acceptance means. Acceptance is active, engaged, fully present with reality as it is. It means seeing clearly what is true rather than wishing things were different. From this clear seeing, wise action becomes possible. Resignation is similar to passivity, but carries an additional element of bitterness or defeat. It means accepting circumstances while resenting them, complying with reality while wishing it were otherwise. This creates internal conflict, a split between what you're doing and what you wish you could do. Acceptance has no such split. It means fully embracing reality as it is, not because you have no choice, but because fighting against what is already true only creates suffering. The recognition that you are part of a larger system is humbling and liberating at the same time. Humbling because it means you are not the center of the universe, not the author of all circumstances, not in complete control of your life's direction. Liberating because it means you don't have to be, that the weight of the world does not rest entirely on your shoulders, that you can relax into being one part of a much larger whole. This larger system includes everything from the biological processes that keep your body functioning to the social structures that shape your opportunities and constraints. It includes the weather that affects your mood, the economy that influences your financial situation, the historical moment into which you were born. You did not choose any of these factors, yet they all shape your experience profoundly. Some people find this recognition disturbing, as if it diminishes their autonomy or reduces them to mere products of circumstance. But consider the alternative. If you truly were separate from all systems, completely independent and self-created, you would be utterly alone, disconnected from everything and everyone. Your existence would be meaningless because meaning arises from connection, from relationship, from being part of something larger than yourself. The truth is that you are both individual and connected, both unique and part of the whole. You have your own perspective, your own consciousness, your own capacity for choice and action. But you exist within a web of relationships and systems that support and constrain you, that give context and meaning to your choices. This is not a limitation, but the very condition that makes life possible. Clouds demonstrate this beautifully. Each cloud is individual, with its own unique shape and character. No two clouds are exactly alike, yet every cloud is made of the same water that has cycled through the atmosphere for billions of years. Every cloud forms according to the same physical laws. Every cloud is connected to every other cloud through the global circulation of air and moisture, individual and universal at the same time, unique and part of the whole, separate and connected. You are held by forces beyond your control. Gravity holds your body to the earth. Oxygen in the air sustains your cells. The sun's energy, transformed through countless processes, powers your metabolism. Your heartbeat continues without your conscious direction. Your immune system fights infections while you sleep. Your neurons fire in patterns that create thoughts and feelings you did not deliberately choose to have. These forces are not obstacles to your freedom, but the very foundation of your existence. Without gravity, you would float away into space. Without oxygen, you would die in minutes. Without the sun, life on Earth would be impossible. Without your autonomous nervous system, you would have to consciously control every breath and heartbeat, leaving no attention for anything else. The forces that constrain you are the same forces that enable you. This is the gift hidden in the recognition of your place in a larger system. You are supported, held, sustained by processes and patterns far beyond your individual power. You don't have to create or maintain everything yourself. You can trust the ground beneath your feet, the air in your lungs, the beating of your heart. You can relax into the fundamental support that existence provides, the way a cloud relaxes into the air that holds it aloft. The forces that shape you are many: genetics and upbringing, culture and circumstance, the countless interactions and experiences that have made you who you are. You did not choose most of these forces. They were given to you, just as the wind is given to clouds. But within these constraints, within this framework of given conditions, you have freedom. Not the freedom to be anything you can imagine, but the freedom to respond authentically, to align with your deepest nature, to flow with, rather than against, the currents of your life. Your genetic inheritance determined many aspects of your physical form, your temperament, your predispositions, and vulnerabilities. You received half your genes from each parent, and they received theirs from their parents, in an unbroken chain stretching back to the origin of life itself. This inheritance shapes your height and eye color, your susceptibility to certain diseases, perhaps even aspects of your personality and intelligence. You had no say in this genetic lottery, yet it profoundly influences your experience of being alive. Your upbringing shaped you in equally powerful ways. The family you were born into, or the families that raised you, provided your first models of how to be human. You learned language and customs, values and beliefs, ways of thinking and feeling that seemed natural because they were all you knew. You absorbed attitudes about yourself and others, about what is possible and impossible, about what matters and what doesn't. Much of this learning happened before you could consciously evaluate or choose it. The culture you grew up in provided another layer of shaping. The time and place of your birth determined what opportunities were available to you, what roles you were expected to fill, what dreams you were encouraged to pursue. If you were born in a different century or a different country, your life would be unrecognizably different. The language you speak, the food you eat, the way you understand the world. All of these are cultural inheritances that you received without choosing them. Circumstance has played its role as well. Chance encounters, random events, accidents and opportunities that you could not predict or control have shaped your path. Perhaps you met someone who changed your life's direction. Perhaps an illness or injury altered your capabilities or priorities. Perhaps you were in the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the wrong time, and everything changed as a result. These circumstances were not chosen, yet they became part of your story, shaping who you are today. The countless interactions and experiences of your life have also left their mark. Every conversation you've had, every book you've read, every place you've visited, every person you've loved or lost, all of these have contributed to your current understanding and way of being. You carry within you the accumulated influence of thousands of encounters, most of which you've forgotten consciously, but which continue to shape your perceptions and reactions. You did not choose most of these forces. They were given to you, just as the wind is given to clouds. A cloud does not choose the wind that carries it. The wind arises from differences in temperature and pressure, from the rotation of the earth, from the heating of the sun. The cloud simply responds, moving where the wind takes it, shaping itself according to the air currents it encounters. It has no control over these forces, yet it exists beautifully, naturally, perfectly suited to its conditions. In the same way, you did not choose the forces that shaped you, but you are here, now, the product of all those forces, and there is a rightness to that. You are exactly who you should be, given everything that has influenced your development. This doesn't mean you are finished or perfect or complete. It means you are appropriate to this moment, suited to your circumstances, a natural result of your history and conditions. But within these constraints, within this framework of given conditions, you have freedom. This freedom is real, though it is not unlimited. You cannot choose to be someone entirely different from who you are. You cannot simply decide to have different genes or a different history. You cannot escape the influence of culture or the impact of circumstances. But you can choose how you respond to all of these factors. You can choose which aspects of your inheritance to embrace and which to question. You can choose how to interpret your experiences and what meaning to give them. This is not the freedom to be anything you can imagine. That kind of unlimited freedom is an illusion, a fantasy that ignores the reality of human existence. You are not a blank slate, not infinitely malleable, not capable of becoming anything at all. You have a nature, a set of characteristics and tendencies that are relatively stable over time. You have limits, boundaries beyond which you cannot go no matter how much you might wish to. But you do have the freedom to respond authentically, to align with your deepest nature, to flow with, rather than against the currents of your life. This is the freedom that matters most, the freedom that is actually available to you in each moment. It is the freedom to be yourself, rather than trying to be someone else, to honor your own values, rather than living according to others' expectations. to move in the direction that feels true rather than forcing yourself down paths that don't fit. Authentic response means listening to what arises within you and trusting it enough to act on it. It means paying attention to your genuine feelings rather than the feelings you think you should have. It means noticing what energizes you and what drains you, what feels aligned and what feels forced. It means being honest with yourself about what you want and need, even when that honesty is uncomfortable or inconvenient. Aligning with your deepest nature means discovering what is most essentially you, beneath all the layers of conditioning and expectation. It means asking yourself what matters to you, not what you've been told should matter. It means exploring your natural inclinations and talents, rather than trying to fit yourself into predetermined molds. It means accepting aspects of yourself that you might have been taught to reject or hide. Flowing with, rather than against the currents of your life, means recognizing which battles are worth fighting and which are better surrendered to. It means distinguishing between healthy challenge that promotes growth and futile struggle that only creates suffering. It means working with your circumstances rather than constantly wishing they were different. It means finding the path of least resistance, not out of laziness, but out of wisdom, about where your energy is best spent. A river demonstrates this principle beautifully. Water flowing downhill doesn't fight against obstacles. It doesn't try to go uphill or force its way through solid rock. Instead, it finds the path of least resistance, flowing around obstacles, carving gradually through softer materials, always moving toward the sea. The river is powerful, not because it forces its way forward, but because it works with gravity and geology, following the natural contours of the land. You can live this way too, finding the natural path through your circumstances, working with your nature rather than against it, responding to obstacles with flexibility rather than rigid determination. This doesn't mean giving up on your goals or abandoning your values. It means pursuing them in a way that honors reality, that acknowledges constraints while still moving forward, that adapts to circumstances while maintaining direction. Think of a tree growing on a mountainside. It doesn't choose the spot where its seed landed. It doesn't complain about the rocky soil or the harsh winds that blow across the slope. It doesn't wish it were growing in a valley where conditions are easier. Instead, it works with what it has. Its roots find cracks in the rock, spreading wide rather than deep when necessary. Its trunk bends and curves around obstacles, finding the path of least resistance while still reaching toward the light. Its branches grow asymmetrically, extending more on the sheltered side, adapting their shape to the prevailing winds. The tree doesn't abandon its nature as a tree. It still grows, still reaches upward, still produces leaves and seeds, but it expresses that nature in a way that fits its particular circumstances. A tree on a windswept mountain looks different from a tree in a protected valley, yet both are fully themselves. Both are complete expressions of their essential nature adapted to their conditions. You can approach your life in the same way. You have certain qualities and characteristics that are fundamental to who you are. These might include your temperament, your values, your interests, your natural talents and inclinations. These are like the tree's nature, its drive to grow and reach toward light. They don't change based on circumstances. They are part of what makes you who you are. But the way you express these qualities, the specific forms your life takes, these can and should adapt to your circumstances. If you value connection but find yourself in a place where you don't easily meet like-minded people, you might express that value through online communities or long-distance friendships rather than local gatherings. If you're drawn to creative expression but lack time or resources for elaborate projects, you might find ways to create in small moments, with simple materials, in forms that fit your constraints. This adaptation is not compromise in the negative sense. It's not settling for less or giving up on what matters. It's finding the specific way that your essential nature can express itself within your particular circumstances. It's being like the mountain tree, fully yourself yet shaped by reality, maintaining your core while adapting your form. Working with your nature rather than against it means recognizing and accepting your natural tendencies rather than constantly fighting them. If you're naturally introverted, You can build a life that includes ample solitude rather than forcing yourself to be constantly social. If you're naturally energetic and active, you can find ways to move and engage physically rather than trying to sit still for long periods. If you learn best through hands-on experience, you can seek out practical learning opportunities rather than forcing yourself through purely theoretical study. This doesn't mean never challenging yourself or staying entirely within your comfort zone. Growth often requires some discomfort, some stretching beyond what comes easily. But there's a difference between healthy challenge that helps you develop and constant struggle against your fundamental nature. The former energizes you, even as it stretches you. The latter exhausts you and often leads nowhere. Many people spend years or even decades fighting against their nature, trying to be someone they're not, because they've absorbed messages about who they should be. They try to be more outgoing when they're naturally quiet, more focused when they're naturally expansive, more careful when they're naturally spontaneous. This constant self-correction is exhausting and usually unsuccessful. The natural tendencies keep reasserting themselves, leading to a cycle of effort and failure that damages self-esteem and wastes energy. When you work with your nature instead, you discover that what you thought were flaws or limitations are simply characteristics that need to be understood and worked with skillfully. Introversion isn't a problem to be fixed, but a way of being that has its own strengths and requires its own conditions. High energy isn't a defect, but a resource that needs proper outlets. Spontaneity isn't irresponsibility, but a capacity that needs to be balanced with enough structure to keep life functional. Responding to obstacles with flexibility rather than rigid determination means recognizing when direct assault on a problem isn't working and finding alternative approaches. Rigid determination says, "I will overcome this obstacle through sheer force of will. I will keep pushing until it yields." This approach sometimes works, but often it leads to exhaustion, frustration, and wasted effort. You bang your head against the wall repeatedly, creating pain but not progress. Flexibility says, "This direct approach isn't working. What else might I try? Is there a way around this obstacle rather than through it? Is there a way to transform the obstacle into an opportunity? Is there something I can learn from this resistance that might change my approach?" This flexibility doesn't mean giving up at the first sign of difficulty. It means being willing to adjust your approach when something clearly isn't working. Water demonstrates this principle beautifully. When water encounters a boulder in its path, it doesn't try to push through. It flows around, finding the gaps and cracks, taking the path of least resistance. Yet over time, that flowing water can wear away the boulder, can carve through solid rock, not through force, but through persistent, patient adaptation. The water maintains its direction, its essential movement downhill toward the sea, while being completely flexible about the specific path it takes. This doesn't mean giving up on your goals or abandoning your values. This is an important distinction. Flexibility and adaptation are not the same as aimlessness or moral relativism. You can maintain clear direction and strong values while being flexible about methods and paths. In fact, this flexibility often makes it more likely that you'll achieve your goals and live according to your values, because you're not wasting energy on approaches that don't work. Your goals are like the sea toward which water flows, the ultimate destination that gives direction to your movement. Your values are like gravity, the fundamental force that determines which way is downhill, what direction is natural and right for you. These can remain constant, even as your specific path varies greatly. You might take detours, might move sideways for a while before resuming downward progress, might pool in one place temporarily before continuing on. But the direction remains clear, the destination unchanged. It means pursuing them in a way that honors reality, that acknowledges constraints while still moving forward, that adapts to circumstances while maintaining direction. Honoring reality means seeing things as they actually are, rather than as you wish they were. It means acknowledging that you have limited time, energy, and resources. It means recognizing that other people have their own needs and agendas that may not align with yours. It means accepting that some things are beyond your control, that luck and circumstance play significant roles in outcomes, that effort alone doesn't guarantee success. This clear-eyed view of reality might seem pessimistic or discouraging, but it's actually liberating. When you see reality clearly, you can work with it effectively. You can make realistic plans, set achievable goals, allocate your resources wisely. You stop wasting energy on impossible tasks or raging against unchangeable circumstances. You focus your efforts where they can actually make a difference. Acknowledging constraints while still moving forward means recognizing limitations without letting them paralyze you. Yes, you have only 24 hours in a day, but you can still accomplish meaningful things within that time. Yes, you have financial limitations, but you can still find ways to pursue what matters to you. Yes, you have responsibilities and obligations, but you can still carve out space for your own growth and joy. The constraints are real, but so are the possibilities within those constraints. Many people fall into one of two traps regarding constraints. Some ignore them, making plans and setting goals as if limitations don't exist, then feeling frustrated and defeated when reality intervenes. Others become so focused on constraints that they see nothing but limitations, concluding that meaningful action is impossible, that they're trapped with no room to move. Both extremes are problematic. The middle path acknowledges constraints while still seeking possibilities, sees limitations clearly while still finding room for action. Adapting to circumstances while maintaining direction is perhaps the most sophisticated skill of all. It requires holding two things simultaneously: a clear sense of where you want to go, and a willingness to adjust how you get there based on changing conditions. It's like sailing, where you have a destination, but must constantly adjust your sails and rudder to work with the wind and currents, sometimes tacking at angles that seem to take you away from your goal, in order to ultimately arrive there. This adaptation requires constant awareness and assessment. You need to pay attention to how your current approach is working, whether you're making progress or just spinning your wheels, whether circumstances have changed in ways that require new strategies. You need to be honest with yourself about what's working and what isn't, willing to abandon approaches you've invested in if they're not producing results. Sometimes the path forward requires patience, waiting for conditions to change before acting. Sometimes it requires creativity, finding unexpected solutions to seemingly impossible problems. Sometimes it requires courage, moving forward despite fear and uncertainty. But always, it requires awareness, paying attention to what is actually happening rather than what you wish were happening, responding to reality as it is rather than as you imagine it to be. Patience is perhaps the hardest requirement for many people in a culture that values speed and immediate results. We want things to happen now, want our efforts to produce visible outcomes quickly, become frustrated when progress is slow or invisible. But some things simply cannot be rushed. Seeds need time to germinate. Wounds need time to heal. Skills need time to develop. Relationships need time to deepen. No amount of impatience will speed these processes, and trying to force them often damages them. Patience doesn't mean passive waiting, doing nothing while hoping things will somehow improve on their own. It means active patience, continuing to do what you can, while accepting that results will come in their own time. It means planting seeds and watering them regularly, while trusting that growth is happening underground even when you can't see it yet. It means working on your craft day after day, even when improvement seems imperceptible, trusting that skill is accumulating even when you can't measure it. This kind of patience requires faith, not religious faith necessarily, but faith in process. Trust that consistent effort in the right direction will eventually produce results even when you can't see them yet. It requires letting go of the need for constant visible progress, accepting that some of the most important growth happens in darkness and silence, beneath the surface where it can't be observed. Waiting for conditions to change before acting is sometimes the wisest course. If you're trying to have a difficult conversation with someone who's currently angry or distressed, waiting until they're calmer will likely lead to better outcomes. If you're trying to launch a project but lack necessary resources or support, waiting and building those foundations first may be more effective than pushing forward prematurely. If you're facing a problem but don't yet understand it well enough to solve it effectively, waiting and gathering more information may be the best action. This waiting is not procrastination or avoidance. It's strategic patience, recognizing that timing matters, that the same action taken at different times can produce very different results. A seed planted in spring grows. The same seed planted in winter dies. The seed hasn't changed, but the conditions have, and those conditions determine the outcome. In the same way, your actions need to be timed appropriately, aligned with conditions that will support rather than undermine them. Sometimes the path forward requires creativity, finding unexpected solutions to seemingly impossible problems. Creativity here doesn't necessarily mean artistic expression, though it can include that. It means the ability to see possibilities that aren't immediately obvious, to connect things in new ways, to find novel approaches when conventional methods don't work. It means thinking laterally, asking what-if questions, being willing to try things that seem unlikely or unconventional. This kind of creativity often emerges when you stop trying to force solutions and instead allow your mind to play with the problem. When you're rigidly focused on finding the right answer, you often miss creative alternatives. When you relax that focus, when you approach the problem with curiosity rather than desperation, new possibilities often emerge. Sometimes they come in moments of rest, in dreams, in the shower, when your conscious mind has stopped working so hard and your unconscious has space to contribute. Seemingly impossible problems often aren't actually impossible. They're just impossible to solve with the approaches you've tried so far. The impossibility is in your current framework, not in reality itself. When you shift your framework, when you question your assumptions about what's possible or necessary, new solutions often appear. What seemed like an immovable obstacle becomes a challenge with multiple possible approaches. Creativity also means being willing to try things that might not work, to experiment and learn from failure rather than only taking actions you're certain will succeed. This requires courage because it means risking failure, risking looking foolish, risking wasted effort. But it's often the only way forward when conventional approaches have failed. The willingness to try unlikely solutions, to test unconventional ideas, to learn from what doesn't work, this is how breakthroughs happen. Sometimes the path forward requires courage, moving forward despite fear and uncertainty. Courage doesn't mean the absence of fear. It means acting in the presence of fear, moving forward even when you're scared, uncertain, doubtful. It means doing what seems right or necessary even when it's uncomfortable or risky. It means being willing to be vulnerable, to fail, to be criticized, to face unknown outcomes. Fear is a natural response to uncertainty and risk. It's your nervous system's way of alerting you to potential danger, preparing your body to fight or flee. This response is valuable when facing actual threats, but it also activates in response to psychological and social risks, situations where there's no physical danger, but where you might be rejected, embarrassed, or disappointed. In these situations, fear can be a signal worth noting, but not necessarily a reason to stop. Moving forward despite fear means acknowledging the fear, understanding what it's trying to protect you from, and then deciding whether that protection is necessary in this situation. Sometimes fear is telling you something important, warning you of real dangers that should be heeded. Other times it's simply reflecting old patterns, reacting to situations as if they're more dangerous than they actually are. Learning to distinguish between these requires practice and self-awareness. Uncertainty is even harder for many people than fear. We want to know how things will turn out before we commit to them. We want guarantees of success before we invest effort. We want to see the entire path before we take the first step. But life rarely offers this kind of certainty. Most meaningful actions require stepping into the unknown, committing to a direction without knowing exactly where it will lead, trusting that you'll figure things out as you go. This tolerance for uncertainty is a skill that can be developed. You can practice taking small steps into the unknown and discovering that you can handle whatever emerges. You can learn to trust your ability to respond to whatever happens, rather than needing to control or predict everything in advance. You can develop faith in your resilience, your capacity to adapt and cope with unexpected outcomes. But always, it requires awareness, paying attention to what is actually happening, rather than what you wish were happening, responding to reality as it is, rather than as you imagine it to be. Awareness is the foundation of everything else. Without it, patience becomes mere passivity, creativity becomes aimless distraction, courage becomes recklessness. With it, you can navigate complexity, respond appropriately to changing conditions, adjust your approach based on feedback. Paying attention to what is actually happening sounds simple but is remarkably difficult. We're constantly interpreting reality through our expectations, assumptions, and desires. We see what we expect to see, hear what we expect to hear, interpret ambiguous situations in ways that confirm our existing beliefs. This filtering is mostly unconscious, happening so automatically that we don't realize we're doing it. True awareness means seeing through this filtering, recognizing when you're interpreting rather than observing, noticing when your assumptions are shaping your perception. It means being curious about reality rather than certain you already understand it. It means being willing to be surprised, to discover that things are different from what you thought, to update your understanding based on new information. This awareness extends to yourself as well as external circumstances. It means noticing your own reactions, your emotional states, your energy levels, your patterns of thought and behavior. It means being honest with yourself about what you're actually feeling and wanting rather than what you think you should feel and want. It means recognizing when you're acting from habit or fear rather than from conscious choice. Responding to reality as it is rather than as you imagine it to be is the culmination of awareness. It means basing your actions on accurate perception rather than wishful thinking or fearful projection. It means acknowledging uncomfortable truths rather than denying them. It means working with actual conditions rather than the conditions you wish existed. This doesn't mean you can't work to change reality, but you have to start from clear understanding of what reality currently is. This is the wisdom clouds embody. They don't resist the wind or complain about the temperature. They don't wish they were different clouds or envy the clouds around them. They simply respond to conditions, forming when moisture and temperature align, dissolving when dry air arrives, moving where the wind takes them. They exist with complete acceptance of their nature and circumstances, and in that acceptance, they find perfect freedom. Clouds never resist the wind. They don't try to hold their position when wind blows. They don't struggle to move in a different direction than the wind is taking them. They simply move with it, allowing themselves to be carried, shaping themselves around the currents, flowing with, rather than against, the forces that act upon them. This complete lack of resistance is part of what makes clouds so graceful, so effortless in their movement across the sky. Resistance creates friction, tension, struggle. When you resist what is, when you fight against circumstances you cannot change, you create suffering without producing useful results. The circumstances remain the same, but you've added the pain of resistance on top of them. This doesn't mean you should never work to change difficult circumstances, but you must first accept that they are what they are before you can effectively respond to them. Clouds don't complain about the temperature. They don't wish it were warmer or cooler. They simply exist at whatever temperature they find themselves, their form and behavior naturally adjusting to thermal conditions. When it's cold, they're made of ice crystals. When it's warm, they're made of water droplets. They don't judge one state as better than another, don't resist the temperature they're experiencing, don't waste energy wishing things were different. Human complaint is often a form of resistance, a way of protesting against reality without actually doing anything to change it. Complaining can serve useful purposes, helping us process difficult emotions or connect with others through shared frustration. But chronic complaint, the constant focus on what's wrong without any move toward acceptance or action, creates a negative filter through which all experience passes. Everything becomes a problem, a source of dissatisfaction, proof that life is difficult and unfair. Let the last image in your mind be of a single cloud at sunset, glowing soft pink and gold, drifting slowly toward the horizon. As it moves, it fades, becoming more transparent, more ethereal, until finally it is indistinguishable from the sky itself. You drift with it, following it into that soft dissolution, that gentle disappearing, that quiet return to formlessness and peace. This cloud at sunset represents the end of a cycle, the completion of a day's journey. It has traveled across the sky since morning, perhaps forming in the cool air of dawn, growing through the warmth of midday, and now dissolving as evening approaches. It has been visible and solid, a clear form against the blue. But now it begins to fade, its edges softening, its substance thinning, until it becomes almost transparent. The colors it displays are among the most beautiful in nature. The setting sun's light, traveling through miles of atmosphere, has lost its blue wavelengths to scattering, leaving only the warm tones of red, orange, pink, and gold. These colors paint the cloud's underside, turning ordinary water vapor into something magical, something that seems to glow from within. The cloud becomes a lantern, a beacon, a moment of pure beauty suspended in the sky. But this beauty is fleeting. As the sun sinks lower, the light that creates these colors withdraws. The brilliant pink fades to pale rose, then to gray. The gold dims to silver, then to charcoal. The cloud that moments ago seemed to burn within a fire now becomes a dark shape against the fading light. The transformation is gradual but inevitable, following the same pattern that has repeated every evening since the Earth first had an atmosphere. As darkness deepens, the cloud becomes harder to see. Its edges blend with the darkening sky. Its form becomes uncertain, more suggestion than solid shape. You have to look carefully to distinguish it from the surrounding air. And if you look away for a moment and then look back, you might not be able to find it again, might not be sure whether it's still there or has dissolved completely. This fading is not sad or tragic. It is natural, appropriate, the way things should be. The cloud has completed its visible phase and is returning to invisibility, becoming vapor again, mixing with the air, ready to condense once more when conditions are right. Nothing is lost in this dissolution. The water remains. The molecules continue their endless cycling. The potential for new clouds persists. Only the form has changed. Only the visible expression has faded. You are invited to drift with this cloud, to follow it in your imagination as it fades and dissolves. Feel yourself becoming lighter, less substantial, less defined. Your body remains where it is, supported by the surface beneath you. But your sense of yourself begins to soften and spread out. The boundaries between you and your surroundings become less clear. You are still you, but you are also part of everything else, connected and continuous with the world around you. This is the experience of falling asleep, the gradual dissolution of waking consciousness into something more fluid and undefined. Your thoughts become less linear, less logical. Images arise and fade without clear connections between them. Time becomes uncertain, stretching and compressing in ways that would be impossible during waking hours. You drift between awareness and unconsciousness, sometimes knowing you are falling asleep, sometimes already dreaming without realizing it. Following the cloud into dissolution means surrendering to this process, allowing it to unfold naturally, without resistance or control. You don't have to make yourself fall asleep. Sleep will come on its own, in its own time, if you simply allow it. Your job is not to force sleep, but to create the conditions that permit it, to relax your body and quiet your mind, to release the day's concerns and open yourself to rest. The soft dissolution the cloud undergoes is gentle, gradual, peaceful. There is no struggle, no sudden change, no violence in this transformation. It happens slowly enough that you barely notice it happening, yet quickly enough that within minutes, what was solid becomes transparent. This is how sleep should come, not as something you fight toward, but as something you drift into, a natural transition from one state to another. The gentle disappearing of the cloud is like the fading of consciousness as sleep approaches. Thoughts that seemed important moments ago lose their urgency and fade away. Concerns that occupied your attention throughout the day become distant and unimportant. Your sense of self, usually so clear and definite, becomes vague and uncertain. You are still aware, but you are aware of less and less, your attention narrowing and softening until finally it releases altogether into sleep. The quiet return to formlessness is perhaps the most profound aspect of this image. Form is what makes things distinct and separate. When the cloud has form, it is clearly a cloud, different from the sky around it. But as it dissolves, it loses this distinctness, this separation. It returns to being part of the sky, indistinguishable from the air that surrounds it. In the same way, as you fall asleep, you lose the sharp sense of being a separate self, distinct from everything else. You return to a more fundamental state of being, formless and undifferentiated, at peace. This formlessness is not emptiness or nothingness. It is fullness, completeness, the state from which all forms arise and to which they return. It is like the clear sky that remains when all clouds have dissolved, not empty, but spacious, not nothing but pure potential. In sleep, you return to this state, this formless awareness that underlies all experience, and there you rest and renew yourself. Peace is what this return brings, not the peace of having solved all problems or achieved all goals, but the peace of letting go, of releasing effort, of surrendering to what is. It is the peace that comes from accepting that you don't have to hold everything together, that you can dissolve and trust that you will reform in the morning, that rest is not death but renewal, not ending but transformation. As you drift with the cloud into this dissolution, notice how natural it feels, how right, how inevitable. This is not something you are doing, but something that is happening, a process as natural as breathing, as automatic as your heartbeat. You don't have to understand it or control it. You simply allow it, the way the cloud allows itself to dissolve, without resistance, without fear, with complete trust in the process. Your body knows how to sleep. It has done this thousands of times. Your brain knows how to release consciousness and enter the restorative states of sleep. Your entire system is designed for this daily cycle of activity and rest. You don't need to teach yourself to sleep or remind yourself how it's done. You only need to stop interfering with the natural process, to let go of the effort to stay awake, to surrender to the gentle pull of sleep that is always present, always waiting for you to stop resisting it. The cloud teaches you this surrender through its example. It doesn't cling to its form, or try to remain visible when conditions no longer support it. It releases, dissolves, returns to the invisible realm from which it came. And in that dissolution, there is no loss, only transformation. The water that was the cloud continues to exist, ready to become visible again when the time is right. In the same way, the consciousness that you experience as yourself doesn't disappear in sleep but only changes form, becoming dream and deep rest before returning to waking awareness in the morning. So let yourself fade like the cloud at sunset, becoming more transparent with each breath, more ethereal with each moment. Feel the weight of your body settling deeper into rest, the activity of your mind slowing and quieting, the urgency of waking life releasing its grip. You are safe here, supported, held by forces larger than yourself. You can let go completely, trusting that everything you need will still be here when you wake, that this dissolution is temporary and healing, that morning will come and you will reform, refreshed and renewed. The horizon toward which the cloud drifts is the boundary between day and night, between waking and sleep, between form and formlessness. As you drift toward this boundary, you may notice yourself crossing back and forth, sometimes more awake, sometimes more asleep, sometimes uncertain which state you're in. This is natural, this hovering at the threshold. Eventually, without noticing the exact moment, you will cross over completely, and the day will end, and sleep will claim you, and you will rest in that formless peace until morning calls you back. Until then, simply drift, following the cloud as it fades into the darkening sky, becoming one with the evening, dissolving into peace. This cloud at sunset represents the end of day, the completion of a cycle. It has traveled across the sky, has changed shape countless times, has perhaps released some of its water as rain. Now, as darkness approaches, it begins to fade. The sunlight that illuminated it withdraws, and the cloud becomes harder to see, blending with the darkening sky. Soon it will be invisible, though it still exists, still floats, still carries its water through the night. You are like this cloud at day's end, ready to fade into rest, to become invisible to the waking world. Your consciousness, so active during the day, begins to dim and soften. Thoughts become less distinct, less urgent. The boundary between self and world becomes less clear. You drift in that twilight space where you are still aware but no longer fully awake, where dreams begin to mix with reality, where time becomes fluid and direction loses meaning. This is the threshold of sleep, the gentle border between waking and dreaming. It is a place of profound rest, where the body begins its nightly work of repair and renewal, where the mind processes the day's experiences, sorting and storing and releasing. You need not do anything to make this happen. It will unfold naturally, automatically, guided by ancient biological rhythms that have operated for millions of years. As you cross this threshold, you leave behind the concerns of the day. They will be there tomorrow, waiting if you need them, but for now, they can rest. You leave behind your identity, your name, and role and history. These too will be there tomorrow, but for now they can dissolve. What remains is pure awareness, consciousness without content, the clear sky of mind that exists before and after and underneath all experience. Sleep now. The clouds will continue their eternal dance without you, and when you wake, they will still be there, waiting to teach you again about patience, about change, about the beauty of things that exist without permanence, without weight, without worry. They will remind you that you too are temporary, that you too are beautiful, that you too are held by forces larger than yourself, shaped by rhythms beyond your control, free to exist without effort, without resistance, without fear. Good night.